So I'm hoping you can all see my whiteboard. Make this larger. And if you're just joining us now on YouTube, we have 2 different segments. So we do the full Tuesday weekly webinar. It runs about 45 minutes or so. And then we also do the Financial 15, which is the approximate 15 minutes of this last segment, which is the financial planning topic. Today's financial planning topic is the future of Social Security. And again, if you're just joining us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe, like, and notify button so that you are notified when we schedule these and when the recordings are available. So we had 2 significant reports. So we had the U.S. Treasury report. That was February 16th, 2023. I'm right here. Let me position this so I can draw on this thing. And then that covers the fiscal year 2022. And the big news in this was, and I'm sorry, the other one was the Congressional Budget Office report, which we're going to go over in a second. And you do see, I've got some nice reports over here on the side. And if you see me looking down, I'm drawing on this pad. So, I'm not like checking my text messages or anything like that. All right. So the first is the U.S. Treasury report. And I'm not going to bury the headline here. The U.S. Treasury reports that the government is on unsustainable fiscal path. So this isn't the first time it's been reported this way. They continue to tell us this is an unsustainable fiscal path, but the unsustainability keeps increasing. And we're going to talk a little bit about politics here in a minute, but I'm going to share with you first what's going on and what's causing this unsustainable fiscal path. Some steps you can take to protect yourself. And geez, I just wish that Washington would get, to kind of get behind it. But you know what? We as a whole, as a country, have to get behind it too, because let's talk about politics first. And then I'll come back to it, because anytime, and I use this example in my class and I've been using it for years, and it happens to be focused on Republicans right now, but it's been focused on other parties in the past, Democrats in the past. There were some senators who said they wanted to potentially change Medicare and Social Security. So now this is a political football that's being used against them in elections. And that's just what happens. So this is what they call the third rail of politics. If you happen to mention that Social Security is underfunded, Medicare is underfunded, and we should do something about this, then you're nearly guaranteeing your loss of your position. And that's unfortunate, because Social Security is underfunded, Medicare is underfunded, and we have to do something about it. But politicians have to have the courage to say it. And we as Americans have to have the courage to stand behind it. Now, I am not saying cutting benefits or anything like that. I'm saying that, look, for our generation, we're likely, so the Generation X and Generation Y and the ones after us, we're probably going to have to make some changes. So I'm getting ahead of myself, getting on my soapbox a little bit, but let's talk about what builds it up here. So spending versus revenue. So here is our spending for fiscal year 2022. Remember, this is fiscal year 2022. Spending equaled $21 trillion. Now, that's an increase of 23.8%, an increase of $1.7 trillion. Really significant, right? So that's a big increase, 23.8% year over year, from 2021 to 2022. So there are some things that you can blame it on. There were some adjustments to pension payments to the VA and the Department of Defense and things like that. But you can't say this is directly related to the pandemic. Some of it is the pandemic, but we're coming off of that pandemic kind of push out, right? That $9 trillion that we pushed out. Revenues. So here's our spending. Here. Revenues. And of course, that is mostly, and we're going to show this, but mostly tax, right? Revenues were $4.9 trillion. That was increased as well, increased by $670 billion. So we had more tax collections in 2022 than we did in 2021, but that was just an increase of 15.7. So going back, if you treated your business or your household like this, you wouldn't be in business or you wouldn't have your household for long. But the federal government treats it differently. So let's look at the spending. I'm going to shoot over here and I'm going to increase this chart for you. just because I thought this was interesting. So here's a good pie chart of where the spending is. So you've got the Department of Veterans Affairs here at 21%. You've got Department of Health and Services here, Department of Defense. You got your Social Security Administration here, Department of Education, Department of Treasury, interest on a national debt, and then all other, right? And that equals $9.1 trillion. So I just share that with you because, you know, there's not a lot of area for reductions here. Everything's kind of around the fringes. So we really do need some kind of vast overhaul. And I'm really thankful I'm not running for office because somebody would be capturing this video right now and certainly be using it against me. But I thought this was interesting, this pie chart for you to look at because I found it interesting as well. But, you know, we don't see, we talk about our class that 101% now of our revenues. And when I started teaching the class, I think it was 96% or 94%. I don't recall. But now it's 101%, which means we're borrowing a portion, right, to fund these, and that's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on a national debt. So it's getting away from us, folks. So let's talk about that. So that is expenditures. Let's talk about revenue breakdowns. So we know the revenues, right? Remember we carried this down. It was 4.9 trillion. I'm up here and I carry this down here to $4.9 trillion. So where does that come from? Well, 530 billion of it, or 11%, comes from other revenues to the federal government. That's fees, Federal Reserve earnings, excise taxes, customs duties, etc. 383 billion, or 8%, comes from corporate taxes. So where does the rest come from? Where does the 81% come from? Well, no big surprise here. 4.2, I have billion, trillion. That should be trillion. $4.12 trillion comes from individual income taxes. So that's a problem, right? So we have a heavy reliance on individual income taxes. That's what drives the U.S. government. So take a look at this here. Where's my expenditure or my revenue chart? There it is. And you can see how that's changed over the years since 2018 all the way today to 2022. So you've got these little slivers here that are corporate taxes and other expenditures. And then this huge amount here, $4.12 trillion, not billion, but $4.12 trillion is individual taxes. So you have to ask yourself, when the government goes to increase revenues, where are they going to go? Well, yeah, hopefully they're going to go here, right? Increase corporate taxes. That's okay. But you know, how much can, if they double this, if they double the corporate tax rate and they double corporate taxes, that still keeps us under $1 trillion, and we still have to handle the lion's share of it. So I hope graphically that makes sense, and certainly by the numbers that makes sense. So this is, I hope you see here, this is what brings us back. I listed that headline twice because it's just so important, and it's an unsustainable fiscal path. So again, if you want to read this report, so this is the executive summary of the Treasurer's report, right? So this is only the executive summary. So it's just 10 pages. You should go through. I went through it and read it. If you're serious about your retirement plan and you want to understand what's going on with the country, you don't have to read the 200 pages that they put out or whatever it was. I think it was at least 100 pages, but the 10-page executive summary makes sense. So you should go through that. So I just kind of picked out some parts of it that I thought would benefit you and give you some understanding of what's going on and why this is an unsustainable fiscal path. And again, we're going to be told this over and over again until something changes. And then a couple of days later, we got the Congressional Budget Office report. So let me switch back here. The Congressional Budget Office report, that was on, okay, come on, stay with me here. Why is that doing it? Okay. Congressional Budget Office report, that was February 15th. And I'm going to just read to you. I pulled some excerpts out of there, and it says Congressional Budget Office's February 15th Budget and Economic Outlook found that without government intervention, the Social Security Administration Trust Fund will become insolvent by 2032. So do you remember what the Social Security and Medicare trust fund report said last year? Well, you don't have to. I'll share it with you. It was right here. It said 2034. Now with disability included, right? So that's old age, security income. I forget that S, but this is Social Security. This is Medicare. And this is Social Security plus disability. So this was scheduled to run out in 2034. So that's been changing around that number a bit. But the Congressional Budget Office says it is now 2032. We won't get another trustee report until at the earliest, I would say May, June, but I think it's more like October when we'll see it. And then you see here, Medicare is scheduled to run out. That's the trust fund. It's depleted. So the trust fund goes to $0. And then there's only a certain amount that is left to pay for benefits. So should the trust fund be depleted, and talking about the Social Security trust fund here, Medicare is obviously much sooner. In 2032, if Social Security trust fund is depleted, then there's only enough to pay 75 to 80% of scheduled Social Security benefits. So it's very, very unlikely that the government's going to allow that to happen because, again, it's just political suicide, right? If suddenly anyone has to stand up in front of you, the president, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the Senate, stands up in front of us all and says, hey, listen, we have to cut. We've known this has been coming. They're not going to tell us that because they don't tell us the truth. But and I know I'm being cynical here, but I think it deserves some cynicism. If they stand up in front of us and say, hey, you current Social Security folks receiving Social Security, we're going to cut your benefit by 25%. It's not going to be good. So we do have to look for answers to that well ahead of time, and we are running out of time. Okay, so let's talk about politics. So the politics of it, we've talked about. We really need people to have courage, not only our elected officials, but ourselves, to be able to support the idea of making changes to these programs. And I'm not saying abandoning the programs. I'm saying making changes for future generations so that we can keep ourselves solvent. We need to I'm just talking about Social Security and Medicare. We also need to address the national debt because very, very soon, and I'm actually going to talk about the debt. I'm planning to talk about the debt by itself next week because it demands its own conversation. So very, very soon we'll be at $1.4 trillion a year just servicing our debt. So you can see, you saw what our revenues are, just over $4 trillion. Most of that comes from us. It doesn't come from corporate. It doesn't come from fees. It doesn't come from those things. It all comes from us. So we've got to have the courage to put that that fear mongering aside and be able to have some real reform and not get caught up in what the politicians are saying, not let them, use this as a political football because it's the future of our country for our children, our grandchildren, etc. So I know, again, I'm on a soapbox here. So what's your next steps? Well, of course, how can you deal with it yourself? Well, aside from driving to Washington and becoming an advocate, a peaceful advocate, then review your plan. Make sure that you're set up. Make sure you're taking these things into account. Read the reports if you'd like to, or listen to this webinar again. Listen to other folks. Plan by generations. So what does that mean? So, as I talked about with Social Security, I would be as a Generation X person, I'm 54 years old. I'm probably 15, 16 years from retirement. I would be 100% fine with saying, the earliest retirement age that I can collect is 67 years old. And for my generation, and full retirement age is say 70. And if you wait until you're 75 or 76, whatever the math works out to be, I haven't done the analysis of what needs to happen to help fix Social Security, but it's something like that. And of course, wage increases, so we only contribute up to a certain amount to Social Security. Of course, that should be increased. We have to help inform our next generation. So if we have children or grandchildren, we've got to let them know about these things, because there's one thing that is consistent in all my time teaching classes, sitting down with individuals and bringing information to them. Never once has anyone said, "Oh, geez, I really wish I would have waited a while longer to hear about this or do this work or get started in this." No, of course not. Everybody says, "I wish I would have known about this 10 years ago." So we've got to educate and help inform the next generation about these problems, because I guarantee you the next generation is not many of them are reading these reports or paying attention to it. They don't know the costs of out-of-pocket costs during retirement when you start receiving a Medicare benefit. They don't know that up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxed. They don't know that it's likely that you're going to spend just as much, if not more, during retirement than you are your working years. They're still caught up in these paradigms, if they're even paying attention, that we were all taught for 40 years that we know now are wrong and should have been handled other ways. So review your plan, talk to the next generation, plan for generations, tax efficient planning. Of course, take care of yourself. Make sure that you're shifting money as you should. We've got our 3 buckets. You've seen me do it a million times. You've got your taxable bucket, your tax deferred bucket, and your tax advantaged, or you can call it tax-free bucket. So you want your mathematically ideal amount in each one of these buckets. And then you want everything else to be in this bucket, because when it hits the fan, if you have everything shifted over already, you and your family, your loved ones, and unfortunately, it's just going to be a small percentage of you. Still, at least you're going to be insulated and protected. So it's very, very important. Investment planning. You've got to think about not always looking through things with the rosy glasses or the rose-colored glasses. We could be in a very long, difficult time. The next year and a half, 3 years, 5 years could certainly be the case. Now, you don't want to be pessimistic. You want to be defensively optimistic, but you want to set up your investments so that you can have growth, but make sure that your needs are taken care of. So the answer to that from listening to me or watching me on these webinars or hearing me in person. It is that the 3 pillars of investments, and I'm really adding a 4th, but you've heard me say this. So it's asset allocation. Make sure that you've got a strong model allocation across all of your investments. Make sure your components are strong. I'm still hearing people that are investing in age-based portfolios and just kind of letting it ride. And that's no good, folks. You don't want to be passive here. And I'm not talking about, when I say passive, it's fine to use, you hear about passive and active management. It's fine to use passive investments like exchange traded funds, in the right places. They're cheap and efficient, and they're all good. I'm talking about your attention and focus. You don't want to be passive there. Principal protection. Make sure that you've got a portion of your investments that are going to potentially earn you some nice return, but are also principal protected. So you can't lose any money in any given year. Account segmentation. Goodness gracious, this is the most common sense approach that almost nobody does to how your funds should be positioned. And you've all have talked to me or heard me talk about it before. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, go to attleborowealth.com, look at our investment strategy. And there's a video in there that talks about the 3 pillars of investing, and adding that 4th pillar of guaranteed lifetime, and ideally tax-free income just wraps it all up. So it's really important that we pay attention to what's going on, be aware of what our leaders are telling us. The government is sending us this information. They give it to us all the time. They've been doing it for decades. We have to pay attention. We can't have our head in the sand. All right, I'm just 5 minutes over, but that's kind of the norm these days. I can't see if there's any questions. I apologize for that. If you have questions, email them in. And I'll be happy to answer them individually. If you want to schedule time to see us or see me, you can reach out to admin or questions, either one. They go to the same place. So admin or questions at attleborowealth.com. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe so you don't miss these notifications or miss these videos. As always, I'll be sending this out to you if you're on my email list, the recording of this. If you want to be on that email list, send me an email. Admin@attleborowealth.com. We'll add you to the email list so you'll get the recordings of these webinars. You never have to miss it. Otherwise, have a great week. And I'll talk to you all next week.